Welcome to Physician Heal Thyself, the podcast, empowering you to take a whole person approach to your well-being, spirit, soul, and body. Join me, your host, Dr. Ana Lara, naturopathic doctor, entrepreneur, and a servant of Jesus Christ. We are not just a body, we are spirit and soul. It's time to integrate medicine and spirituality into our healing. Let's get started. Welcome back to Physician Heal Thyself, the podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ana Lara, and today I have a special guest. His name is Bill Brassow. He is the owner of PodWorks Studio here in Mesa, Arizona, and he's actually the producer that helps me with this podcast. So help me welcome Bill.
Hi, thank you.
You know, I invited you on the podcast because we always have such great conversations.
We do. Obviously,
away from the mic, away from the camera.
Yeah.
Before and after our, I started recording. And from the beginning, I'm like, I should have you on the podcast. And the last time we were recording, you mentioned some ideas about we should talk about mental health and how there's a rise in mental health issues, over the past years. And I thought, yeah, that's so true. Why don't I have you come on board and let's continue that conversation we were having, off camera, now in front of a camera. But before we do that, Bill, tell us a little bit about you because you impressed me with a lot that you know and that you've done. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Oh, okay. Well, God graced the earth with me on February 12th, 1975. So
your birthday's February 12th?
Yeah, it is.
Mine's is the 13th.
Hey, yay!
Get along.
Right on. Yeah. So so I was born back in, and then spent my whole childhood. I grew up in church. So you and I share a faith, and learned a lot. I grew up as a Lutheran, right? And I have a funny story about that later on, but. And then 17 days, I was a terrible high school student, absolutely terrible. I did not like it. I didn't like the structure of the learning, and it just wasn't me. So 17 days after graduating high school, I found myself in Navy boot camp in Camp Orlando, we called it. Nothing camp about it. It was extremely hot in the middle of June in Orlando. Served in the military for 10 years, learned a lot of responsibility. Gained a lot of lifelong friends. Some I still, stay in good touch with over Facebook and whatnot. And then I got out of the Navy after I married my high school sweetheart. I went on to one deployment, and she really couldn't handle me being gone too well. So, and the Navy had kind of run its course for me. So we decided that I was going to get out. And I got out, and then I held 5 jobs in 4 years trying to figure out what on earth it is I wanted to do. Worked at University of Phoenix, which is where I ended up getting a business degree that has done me absolutely nothing. Right. And then I got into a company called Eaton, which is a large electrical manufacturer. Did pretty well there, had a good time, but was finding myself not doing so well with the corporate world. So I ventured out on my own. Backtrack. While I was at Eaton, I started a weekend warrior business for video production called Second Star Productions. So my wife and I she's a Disney fanatic, and she kind of pulls me along with it, right? And so Second Star to the right from Peter Pan is where we came up with that name. We thought it was pretty cool. The reason we did is because I have 2 girls. One of them, Madison, she has my grandbaby now, so I'm all excited about that. Yeah. When she was born, she was not the most graceful child, right? So she was a little clumsy because she was pretty tall for her age. So she was a little, I guess, uneven at times, a little off balance. So we were like, okay, we need to teach this kid some grace, right? Well, I'm not going to teach her grace. And my wife is very graceful, but I don't think she knows how to teach a kid grace. Yeah. So we decided to put her in dance classes, right? And it worked. She's one of the most graceful human beings I know today, right? But while she was in dance, we, like most involved parents, were buying all the pictures and the recital videos. And every time we'd get a recital video back, it's like a little Sony Handycam sitting at the back of the auditorium, just as wide as that lens could go. And I'd send the video to my parents in Florida. And I'd have to say, yeah, the fifth dance and the fourth blip from the left, that's your granddaughter. She's doing great. I know you can't. So I was like, okay, we can do this better. So we got a nice camera and a tripod, and I jumped on YouTube University and started figuring it out.
Oh, wow.
And then here I am today.
So you self-taught yourself.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, me and YouTube.
That's right.
Yeah.
You can learn a lot online.
Yeah, you sure can. Yeah.
How long have you had this studio here for?
I've been in this location for a little over 4 years, but I just went a little over 18 years in video production.
Okay. So if anyone is watching, listening, and they want to start a podcast,
you can come start it at PodWorks Studios.
That's right. Come talk to Bill.
That's right. Come talk to me.
There's many options. You have some, not just in studio, but now you can help people who want to set up their own studio at home. Tell us a little bit about that, how you can help people with that.
Yeah, so at PodWorks Studios, we have 3 different options for studios. We have a mobile studio where we come to you. Mm-hmm. So if you're local to Phoenix, we will bring our equipment out to you and find a nice spot in your office or house or whatever it may be and set up a multi-camera podcast production and record and leave. And then, go on our day. And then we have our in studio, which we're in the studio right now. We're in Studio 2. We have 2 studios here. And then we have a mobile studio. And our mobile studio is basically an online platform. So if you have a recording area at home or at your office or whatever it may be, and you have some equipment, or we can sell you equipment if you need it, you can just log in virtually and record. And you can do it one of 2 ways. We can either log in with you as a virtual producer, where we sit there and we kind of walk you through the steps of recording your show, make sure your sound and your video looks good and your lighting is good. And same thing for an online guest if you bring them in. Or you can record on your own. If you're dialed in with the tech and you don't really need our help, you can record on your own. Just send us a message. Say, I just recorded episode 22, and we'll jump in there and edit it and upload it. But that's the big thing is when we created the studio, I created it with business owners in mind. Mm-hmm. Being a business owner myself, I realized how valuable our time is. So I wanted to create a system that it was a cost-effective, high-quality system that takes as little time out of your day as possible. Yeah. So at our studio, we do bulk recording. Right, you can come by twice a month for 90 minutes and record 2 episodes each, or you can come by once a month for 3 hours and record all 4 episodes. Yeah. Right, that's not that easy. You leave here and your brain's a little bit like oatmeal, right? A little bit. Yeah, but it's very effective. But then we do all the editing and we upload all of your main content, and we create social media clips for you. We do transcripts, and we do the custom YouTube thumbnails for every single episode.
Yeah. I will say that this has been very helpful. I wanted to start a podcast 4 or 5 years ago, but I just knew I didn't have the time to figure out all of the technical stuff and uploading. I just knew I would drop the ball. And I remember when, actually it was a colleague of mine who said, hey, I met this guy who does this, and I was in contact with him from there, got started. But I love the system that you have in place for busy people because I don't have time to edit. A lot of people ask me, how do you do it all? You're running a clinic, you're seeing patients, you do a podcast, you have a family, you're working out, how do you do it? I'm like, well, if you have a nice system in place, it helps. And you have a really good system here where we're consistently recording and you're doing everything else. I don't have to worry. It gets posted, uploaded. And, and keep going. So this is episode 45. Yeah. That's a huge achievement for me.
You're almost at a full year of every 52 absolutely. Weeks. Yeah.
Almost there.
Did you know that 90% of podcasts don't make it past to episode 10?
Wow.
90%. They say there's 4.4 million podcasts.
4.4 million podcasts.
Of which 90% of them don't have more than 10 episodes.
Wow. It's hard work. It's hard work. It is. Not just the content, but just trying to get it out to a larger audience. It takes time. So
it does.
I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for the many conversations that we've had. So let's jump into, the topic that we wanted to talk. You mentioned that you see on your side, and I always like to get the perspective of someone who's not in healthcare, who's not in the mental health field. And they get this perspective, they see this perspective from the outside, because then it's not just me as a doctor seeing this trend. Other people see it. So you mentioned, that there's this rise in mental health issues. Why did you say that? Like, what is it that you're perceiving right now in our world?
I think it's the reaction to it that I'm seeing that's making me know that there's a rise in mental health issues. Obviously, as a business owner, I've done a lot of networking and I've connected with a lot of people and, friends with them on Facebook and all the time I am seeing posts about don't lose focus, don't, be the best you can be. You're the only competition that you have and things like this. And while it's great messaging, it's good for mindset, right? But then it veers into this whole, like there's a concern out there. Like everybody knows somebody with a mental health condition. Everybody. Mm-hmm. I know several people with mental health conditions. I didn't used to know that many people. I thought maybe it wasn't so prevalent. But I don't think so. Like people seem to be pretty emotionally stable, I would say 10, 12 years ago. But in the past decade, maybe 15 years, things seem to be off to me. That's completely non-clinical evaluation. But
and it's hard to tell, like, is it because more people are understanding the human experience, the human psyche, and they're giving themselves permission and others permission to talk about their feelings, to talk about the mental health aspect? Or are we borderlining, like, becoming like victims of this? And, is that like kind of like it's like too much?
So there's this theory, and I can't remember, there's a doctor that talks about this theory. I can't remember who it was, mm-hmm. where they said, are you more aware of a mental condition that you may have because there's more awareness around it? Mm-hmm. Right? So like if there wasn't all this awareness that people have now around mental health, would you even know if you had a mental health condition? And so are we creating a society of, what is it when you, mitochondriac, right? Yeah, a bunch of mitochondriacs in the mental health world, right? You hear all these different conditions with mental health, and now do we think we have a mental health problem simply because there's more awareness of it, right? And then is that a good or a bad thing?
Yeah. It's hard to tell which one is what's really happening. What I can say is that there might be a combination of both. As you're speaking, I'm thinking of my maternal grandmother and how, their generation, she's passed away, but she was like 96 when she died, and this is like almost 10 years ago, right? So in her generation, talking about feelings, expressing feelings, showing emotions just wasn't, in that culture in that time, it just wasn't something that was acceptable. It was looked at as a sign of weakness. So, but I can tell you, looking back at the few times, the interactions that I had with her, I can see that she did have mental health issues, and probably because the home environment that she grew up in, experiencing a father who was very abusive, verbally, physically, that there is probably some health concerns. But, Mexican moms would never, depression, get to work.
Yeah.
What do you mean depression? Like, they don't understand the word depression or anxiety. It's just in your head. Get moving and, you move on.
Yeah. Oh, no, I grew up in South Chandler. Mm-hmm. Which, for those who don't know, South Chandler has a heavy Hispanic population. I went to Chandler High School, so I'm very aware of the culture. Mm-hmm. I would say well over 50% of my friends were Mexican, mm-hmm. and or Mexican American, know, and I was very, very, very well of the men were the same way, very stoic, very, very seldom showed information other than maybe anger sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Anger,
right?
Yeah.
But the white culture isn't far off.
That's what I'm saying. It really, I have learned to look past. There might be some cultural differences, but everyone is the same. There's a lot of white culture that, that I've heard, like Scandinavians and, just they're just very cold and rigid, and they don't show expression and emotions. And so I'm like, yeah, this is true. African Americans, Native American, like it's not a race issue. It's everyone.
Right.
We might experience different challenges, but there's still challenges at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I will say that from my end of the table, right, what I have seen clinically is definitely a huge rise in mental health. And people aren't even saying, like, I'm depressed or I have anxiety or and it's young people.
Yeah.
And after COVID, that really, I remember, Bill, so COVID lockdowns here were like sometime in March, right around this time of the year in 2020. By the time that the lockdowns lifted, I was seeing, so it was around summertime, I was seeing a lot of 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old girls in my office. Like, it was just like, I was busy with them.
That's
and
crazy.
I felt like I was a counselor. And I'm trained to do, mind, body, mental health, some of the stuff. But I'm not a licensed therapist. I think naturally I just like to, guide people. But I had these young girls and not able to verbally express themselves and say, like, sometimes people can't say I have anxiety, or I have depression. And so they'll explain, I just feel down, or I feel like, I'm like, my heart is racing all the time. And like, I'm not calm. And so anxiety, right?
Yeah.
So they're describing the anxiety, they're describing the depression. But what was most concerning was the amount of, almost all of them were suicidal.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I also...
At that
age, yeah. So what's interesting is that same year, that same summer, I started seeing a lot of nurses, a lot of registered nurses that worked at, the big hospitals here, children's hospitals. And one of them was she was a psychiatrist or psychologist there, and she would evaluate all the children that would come in. Well, she started to share with me, like, there's such a rise in mental health in these young children, not teenagers, children. And she says, I had never seen anything like this. A 6-year-old who tried to commit suicide. So, and I know there's a lot of factors. It wasn't just COVID. It could have been these kids were home. Some of the kids were probably safer at school than they were home.
That's true.
Because, let's face it, we live in a world that's broken, where parents are, hurt and they have so many wounds that they need to heal themselves, and they're passing their own trauma to their children. And you have these lockdowns. Parents are, I remember I was like stressed, like, what am I going to do with my kid?
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to bring her to the office, sit her there. Hopefully she does the work. Like, I don't have time to do both. And it was just stressful, and schools were figuring things out. So I can imagine a parent who is not in the right state of mind, how violent that person can be with the child at home.
We could probably have a whole nother podcast about our reaction as a society to COVID.
Yeah.
Right. And I think part of what we're seeing right now is the repercussions of poor decisions around that.
Absolutely.
Okay. But the one thing all right, so there's a couple things that I think is going on. One thing that I think is makes me think that mental health truly is a problem, and it's not just what was the term we used? Hypochondriac.
Hypochondriac, right? Yeah.
There are more people in the mental health professions than we've ever seen before. Like, every time you turn around, somebody's a counselor, somebody's a psychiatrist, somebody's this, somebody's that. But also, we have never seen worse mental health, especially in our youth, in the country's history.
Yeah.
And I think COVID had a lot to do with it, but I also think it's the social media. So
absolutely.
If I can give a shout out to another show that records here really quick.
Absolutely.
So there's a show here that is called the Dope Dad Podcast. Shout out to my boy OJ.
Okay.
It is a fantastic show. He talks about being a dad in today's society. Brings on other dads, right? And one of the things that they bring up quite often is the role of social media in our children's lives, and how, like, can't even imagine what it's like growing up constantly being evaluated and judged and this and that, right? And like, these kids think that one little comment or one little mistake in a post that they put on Instagram is going to just ruin their life. But that's the perception they have, right? And so we've created this world while trying to connect the world together. I'm looking at it like, well, maybe we shouldn't have done this.
Yeah.
Some of me says that, like I love the technology. It's cool, but
I have to agree with you. Even as an adult, it has such an impact on us. Earlier this year, from January on to, end of February, I was off social media just because I needed a break from it. And it was such a great benefit for my brain or for my mental health that I'm like, yeah, it's too much. And, having created this podcast, we do a lot of work to put a lot of great content here for people, but people will still listen to the stupid shit online.
Yes, they will.
It amazes me.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
It amazes me that people are drawn to the nonsense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And young people and adults do the same thing. There's so much information that there's an abundance of information coming at us, and we're taking all of this in. And so the thing with children, young people, is that their subconscious mind, it's receiving billions of pieces of information where the conscious mind is not. And so all of this information is being fed into the subconscious mind, which is going to contribute to their emotions and their behaviors.
Yeah.
And so that's what they act out, it's all that subconscious information that they're receiving from social media, TV, whatever technology they're exposed to. I definitely do agree that technology has a big role in most of the mental health issues. There's many different things that factor into an increase in mental health. And you said something about counselors. That what's interesting is that there's such a great number of people going into the field of counseling, but there's even more that are leaving.
Really?
Yeah. Brenda Cochran, who's a Christian counselor, and she now has her own practice, but prior to that, she managed a huge practice of, counseling, and she had a hard time hiring people. I remember she would tell me, man, there's such a turnaround. Counselors are quitting. They're going into different fields. They're just burned out. They don't want to do this anymore. And it's hard to hire new counselors. So there's a shortage, in that aspect as well, of not having enough people to help. In some of these practices, there's like a 1 or 2 or 3, depends on the practice, but there's a 2-3 month wait list to get into to be seen.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I'm sure there's like a 10 or a 12 to 1 patient to doctor ratio.
Oh yeah.
In a lot of them too, right? Or more than that, probably, right? Yeah. I mean, you go and see a counselor for 30 minutes, and then now they're seeing 16 patients a day, 5 days a week. I don't remember when it started, but there was this trend that started, and it seems to keep going on, that everybody should see a counselor, right? I don't think that's true.
I don't think
by
that's
any
true.
means, right?
Yeah.
I think there are people that should seek out professional help. Absolutely, there are. But I think all the people that do it just because they think they need to, or something, I don't agree with that. Like, there's a lot of people that are very mentally stable that.
Yeah, they give good guidance.
Yeah.
I tell people, be part of a church. That's a community.
Yeah.
Oftentimes churches, especially big churches, they have groups that it's a counseling group. Sometimes there's counselors there, but there's different groups for different grieving and addiction.
Yeah.
Whatever issue.
Marriage.
And those support groups, that community, that's real community.
That's real community.
When you're in person.
That's right.
That's real community.
Right.
I get it that there's a lot going online, and all these things are being online, and there's a time and place for that. But I think we really need to get offline and get in person in your community. Yeah. Find a local community church in your area that you're doing life with these individuals, and that you can talk about your issues. And you're not going to start off talking about your issues, but you get to know people and you build trust. And through that doing life together, that's when you're sharing life and older, and have relationships with people who are older and wiser than you.
Yes, absolutely.
Because you're going to learn from their experiences.
Yeah, and people outside of your circle, outside of your
comfort
house,
zone. Yeah.
And you want to get real. You brought up church, right? Okay, so Well, another trend I'm noticing is the more we push God out of this country, the more problems we have.
Absolutely.
And I don't see how people can just look past that.
Yeah.
That's just, it's clear and evident that the more we push God out of this country, the more problems we have. And
Absolutely.
I think mental health is one of those problems.
Absolutely. You know, during COVID, I mean, I'm not going to say it didn't have an impact on me, but I wasn't losing my mind. I was still living life. I was still doing things. And actually, you know what? One of my goals was,
I was
Bill,
like pissed off for a whole year.
You're pissed off. I was pissed off here and there because I'm like, how can people not see this?
Yeah.
That's a whole different episode, right?
Yeah.
Different topic. But I was upset, but I didn't lose my marbles.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I didn't want to push what the fears that everyone was telling us, that were telling us, well, you need to mask up, you need to do this, you need to social this. I wasn't projecting that to my kids. I was like a shield. I remember going to Target, and there was, my daughter was 4 or 5 years old. Yeah, 4? Like around that time, like 3 or 4 years old. And, she didn't have a mask on. I never made my daughters wear a mask out in public. Like, whatever.
Yeah.
God gave us an innate immune system. You go figure it out. I'm not going to do that to my child. And so we went to Target, and we were at the self-checkout. And there was another little girl the same age as my daughter. Mind you, my daughter is like twirling around, dancing at the store, on the floor, germs all over her hands.
Just
and the
germing
the other little girl's like, Mom, look, she's on the floor. She's getting dirty. And then my daughter doesn't care. She's just swaying around, dancing. And why doesn't she have a mask? And another little girl her age who this agenda was pushed onto her, the fear that you are not safe to be without a mask, to dance and twirl around and be on the floor. Now, my daughter is a whole different beast. No matter how many times I would tell her, don't be on the floor.
Yeah.
She was on the floor doing her little dance. And so I'm like, I'm just not going to fight her on this. I'm just going to let her be.
Yeah.
But you know what? She was happy.
Yeah.
She was a happy little girl.
Yeah.
Living in her little world. They didn't care who was wearing a mask.
Absolutely.
And so I look at them now and I'm like, I don't see that they were impacted as much as other children were because I didn't make it a big deal at home. And so I, as parents, it is a responsibility to be informed and to be able to guide our children in a safe way. And for parents to have an ongoing conversation with their children. Because if they're not having conversation with these topics, that they experience, that we experience in life, someone else is.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it's the ignorant kids in their classes that are projecting all of this agenda onto them. But I agree. I think that so I had a lot of friends that would ask me, why are you so happy? Like, how are you getting through this? And I'm like, man, let me tell you why. Because I have God in my life.
Yeah.
And I cannot live my life without turning to His Word, turning to Him for guidance. I don't know how else to do it because even with that, I find myself in moments of struggling. So imagine not having, not being rooted in His Word, not having a relationship with God, not making God the center of your life.
Yeah.
It makes life very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And it makes mental health issues even more difficult. Now, it doesn't mean that people who believe in God don't have mental health issues.
Right.
They do, and usually there's a much deeper rooted reason for that. There's trauma that was never healed through, but there's a solution for that, And I always believe this. I believe that healing can happen in many different ways. It might be through a counselor. It might be through church, someone praying for you, having deliverance. It might just you be seeking God out yourself individually. There's many different ways that you can find healing physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, right?
Yeah.
So, you just got to find what's your jam, like what works for you.
I believe that there is a time and place for drugs, right? There are certain mental health conditions.
Pharmaceutical drugs.
Right. Yeah.
A pharmaceutical
drugs. Yeah.
Not illegal substances.
Yeah. That, there's a chemical imbalance in somebody's brain that's causing whatever, right? I don't know the science behind it. So, but I think we're a way over-drugged society.
Yeah.
Ritalin. Let's talk about Ritalin for a second, right?
Yeah.
Growing up, us boys were just rowdy all the time. Yeah. We were allowed to go outside and just wreak havoc during recess because the teachers knew we got to go out and get all that energy out and this and that, right? And now it just seems that, well, let's just drug them up so that they, the energy doesn't exist in them. I think that's creating problems. I think the whole ADHD, ADD thing, I have a hard time really buying into so many kids diagnosed with that. That's just strange to me, So I think it goes back. I think it goes back even farther, back to my time when kids were being diagnosed with this, and the pharmaceuticals are there to rescue everybody. Yeah. In my opinion, the pharmaceuticals should be working to put themselves out of their business. Like if you want to give people drugs, you should be working to okay, you give them a drug, and guess what? They're going to get better, and they're done with it. Yeah. Not be on it for the rest of their lives or create other problems. I don't know. I'm going down a rabbit hole.
It doesn't heal people. The pharmaceutical, it's not going to heal them. It just keeps them in this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you, I do get a lot of parents who bring in, almost all of them are boys. I don't ever have had a parent bring their daughter because they think she has ADHD.
Yeah.
It's always boys, and I look at them, I interact with them, I assess them. From the moment they enter my clinic, I'm interacting with the child. And I'm like, no, they're fine. They're boys.
Yeah.
And so I have to explain the biology. They may have more energy. They have more muscle mass. They're going to make more testosterone. They're wired.
They're more aggressive.
Different.
Yeah, exactly.
They're just meant to move more than a girl will.
Yeah.
And even some girls are active too. But so I do a neurotransmitter test on these children, and the insurance doesn't cover it. But I tell parents, if you really want to see if there's a chemical imbalance, a neurotransmitter imbalance in them, let's do this neurotransmitter test. It's a urine collection. You collect 4 collections throughout the day. We send it into the lab. It's like $250 test, $270. They do the test. They send it to the lab. I get the result. And that lets me know all the neurotransmitters, including norepinephrine, epinephrine, like your adrenaline, cortisol numbers in there. So then that gives me an idea. Are they really hyper? Are there neurotransmitters that are super excitatory that are elevated? Or maybe the inhibitory neurotransmitters are too low, and so those two are supposed to balance each other. So most of the time, they're normal, and I'm like, they're just a normal kid. There's nothing wrong with them.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is a matter of correcting and just guiding them, not so much correcting, but guiding them. There's a time and place. But I think the problem is schools also, it's too much sitting down.
Yeah.
I find myself at my age going to conferences that are 6, 7, 8 hours a day, 3, 4 days, back to back. And I am overwhelmed. I'm like, how did I get through medical school? Like, that's a lot of sitting down.
Yeah.
But I'm older, and I can force myself to get through that class, right? Yeah. To sit through that. And I know I have the permission to get up. I can get up and go to the bathroom, move around, do whatever I want at these conferences. And in schools, children don't have that autonomy to get up and move around. And so I think the part of the problem is the way the schools are structured. It's too long.
Yeah.
That's why other countries, they delay children starting school till they're like about 7 years old.
Yep.
They start later in the day.
Yep.
Our brains are not really on till about 9 or 10 o'clock.
Yeah. And these kids are starting at like 7 a.m. and stuff. 7:30,
8 o'clock. It's too early for them.
Yeah.
They should still be asleep. I tell people between 2 and 4 o'clock, or cortisol drops. It doesn't matter who you are, what age. Our cortisol starts to drop because it's getting ready for us to go to bed. And so that's the other thing is that, they're in school longer during a time that they're not very productive. I once saw this study. I just thought of that. I once read the study where they looked at what were the peak times of performance. So the best, they looked at all these companies, and the best time that people performed the best was between 10 and 11 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
And production would fall at 3 o'clock. So I say we should work between 10 and 3, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
That should be our work day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you imagine everyone worked that though? I mean, it'd be great.
Yeah. You know how much would get done?
You're super productive.
Probably more than an 8-hour day.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
So I think
Yeah,
I mean, there's so many things that contribute to mental health. A lot of it, though, from being in practice and interacting with people, it's unresolved, unhealed child trauma and big trauma, not like my parents didn't buy me the shoes that I wanted. No. Like big traumas that they've experienced, whether it's physical abuse, mental abuse, sexual abuse. Those traumas have really impacted. I can see that is truly impacting people's mental health as they get older. The big stressor that I hear from, adults is their work. Their work situation creates a lot of stress for them.
Yeah, which is sad.
It's sad.
Yeah,
because you're there
spend
8-10 hours
a third
a day.
of your life at work. I mean, yeah.
And so the environments in these companies are not healthy.
Right.
Sometimes they're very toxic.
Right.
Management always seems to be the problem.
Yeah.
There's those that work hard and those that hardly work.
Yeah.
And the ones that hardly work get away with stuff.
Right. And this is what's cool. So in the industry I'm in, right, I've noticed this growth in the coaching industry, right? There's a lot of business coaches out there, and all of them are talking about company culture.
Yeah.
They know there's a problem, right? And it's inspiring to see all these people out there trying to do something about it. Like, they're studied, they're certified, they're whatever it may be. They know what the answer is, right? They just got to get into these organizations and help them change. Because I think the organizations, one, when you're looking at your own place, your own company, it's hard to see the issue, right?
Yeah.
Because you're right there. You're not at a 20,000-foot view like somebody who'd be a coach or a consultant or somebody comes in to evaluate your company culture. They come in and they're not emotionally attached to it either.
Yeah.
Right? So they're going to give you the raw deal, man. This is what's going on in your company. This is why your employees keep leaving. This is why they leave bad reviews on LinkedIn or whatever as for you as an employer because of this, and this. And I know you don't want to hear that, but you got to change this. You got to change it,
Yeah.
So I do appreciate that. I like that reaction that we're seeing because, organizations, they're not I don't think they're interested in fixing it themselves, or maybe they just don't know how.
It's hard for them. And I think you're right. I think if you bring someone from the outside that has neutral eyes, neutral approach to it, they're observing the behavior, and it makes more sense to do that. Early when I was in my mid-20s, I was working for a financial institution, and they brought someone to come in and evaluate the company. And we had, they called them affinity groups. They took people from every department, every branch, to create these groups, and we would brainstorm, give input, feedback, and then the person who was evaluating, I don't know what they would call them, but it was an outside, company that would come in, gather this information, report it to the upper management, and then from there kind of look at what's working, what's not working, what can we change on all different areas. And what was really interesting about this company, I will say that this financial institution has been one of the best places that I worked for.
Really?
And that I experienced top exceptional leadership. The CEO...
Can you say the company?
It's Arizona Financial Credit Union. It used to be Arizona Federal Financial Credit, or Arizona Federal Credit Union, but it's now Arizona Financial Credit Union.
Okay.
I think the CEO is still the same CEO. I was very impressed with this man. I remember when I started, I went through training. He, asked me something and I shared it. 6 months later, I was part of this affinity group. And I remember he asked me, hey, how was that class that you were in? I was in college. I was doing my degree in finance. And he asked me specifically about the class that I mentioned to him 6 months ago. The fact that he remembered my name, from one conversation that I had with him, was you're seen, you're heard, that you're valued and appreciated.
Yeah.
And so they continue to have these affinity groups. Every month we would meet together and bring cultural change, bring changes to processes, and also the members, because they're not customers, they're members of the institution. So we would interview and survey, the members of the bank, of the institution. What was their feedback or opinions on different things, and we would implement the changes.
Yeah.
If they said the deposit slips, the lines are too small, we want this on there, we want that on there, we would change it. Yeah. And I always say that as a company, the best place you can get information is your customer. Ask them what works.
Yeah.
Ask them what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And don't take it personal.
Yeah.
Just evaluate and see what changes because sometimes you don't want to change what does work.
Right.
You want to keep that the same, but you want to change what doesn't work. And employers should do the same, because as a business owner, right? As business owners, and even a big corporation, their number one customer is their employees.
Yeah. Yeah.
Their employees have to be happy. If their employees are not happy, they're not going to be happy to serve the customer.
That's right. Yeah. And you can tell when you walk into a company and there is a good company culture there, and the mental health of those employees is good, because I'm trying to think, like Costco.
Yeah.
Every time I go into Costco, everybody in there is so helpful. I actually worked there. I worked there for like 4 or 5 months. That was the first job I had in the Navy. They're a phenomenal employer. They're really good. I still walk into the Costco I used to work at, and I see guys in there that worked in there 12 years ago now, almost, maybe 15 years ago when I worked there. They're still there. Don't
you find that you've also find yourself being more loyal to that company that you work for?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm still my accounts, all my accounts, all of it is with Arizona Financial.
Yeah.
I refer people to that institution. Yeah. I speak good things about it. I learned so much through that company.
Yeah.
So what they invested into me, it's really, believe it or not, but the fruits of that labor show up in my practice with my patients because of what they invested in me.
Yeah.
The education, the training they invested in me.
Yeah.
So I think that's what good culture does, right? And that's applied across the board to any institution, whether it's a church. And I know some people don't like to see a church as a business.
Yeah.
But it does kind of have the same, nuts and bolts to it.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to feel like a business, but there's a lot of the leadership components that get passed down. And if the leaders, one of the big things, once again, because of that CEO was that leaders lead from the front.
Yeah.
And whatever happens in leadership at the top is going to trickle down to the bottom.
Yeah, for sure.
And so if you want the people who are following, who are the employees or whoever it is that you're, delegating work to, you want them to be happy, then you have to make the change, and then you'll see the change on the bottom trickling down.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, absolutely. just a lot of, but that's one of the things is that I see is a lot of my patients are work stress is up there.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be that way.
No.
Company culture is very important for mental health. Like I said, you spend a third of your life at work, right?
Yeah.
You should enjoy it. You should enjoy what you do, And some jobs suck. Let's just face it, right? Some jobs suck. But the job can suck, but the culture at the company can be great.
Yeah.
Right? And it can be a culture of, hey, we know this job sucks, but this is how we're going to make it better, make it better for you to come to work.
Yeah.
Right? And show effort in that. And it's kind of crazy these days. It's a wild world we live in right now, right?
It is. And
yeah.
I guess the takeaway from this, what would you say the takeaway you would want our audience to know about mental health being on the rise?
Oh, man. That's a good question. I think the biggest takeaway is mental health, it's important. Mm-hmm. But focus on God. You know what I mean? You got to find something that's bigger and better than yourself.
Yeah.
Right? And let that be your compass, right? And for Christians, that's God. Mm-hmm. Right? And when God is your compass, your life is better.
Yeah, He'll guide you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that it's good that we're aware of mental health. I think it's important. I still I have a hard time trusting some of the medical community right now about things.
Yeah.
Right. And so that.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a doctor.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
no, me too. I think
You're my doctor.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I think there's a balance. There's a balance in this, and discernment is very important. So
yeah, and that balance is hard to find.
Balance is hard to find, and that's why I will say, not as a doctor, as a personal, as a person, is that when I put my faith and trust in God, and I pray and I meditate on His Word, that He does give me guidance on what is that next step to do. And that's sometimes as far as you need to go with patients. I tell them, don't worry about the 5 years, 10 years, or the past. Just think about what is the very next step I need to do.
Yeah.
And God will reveal what that next step is.
He
is
the compass. In front of the other.
1 foot, exactly. If God is the center of your world, He's going to navigate you and guide you where you need to go and what you need to do. And there's just so much in His Word. And I understand that a lot of people, don't want religion, don't get religion. I'm talking about have a relationship with God, because He is a great physician. He is a great surgeon. He is a great counselor. He's a great healer, and God will provide the direction of where you need to go. He's not going to do it for you, but He's going to guide you what that next step is. And He might tell you, get a counselor.
Yeah.
At this point, you do need a counselor because you're suicidal.
Absolutely.
At this point, you do need some medication because you're suicidal.
Yeah, if you have any suicidal thoughts or you're thinking about hurting somebody else, go
get help.
Professional help right now.
Right now.
And I mean, there are so many avenues. Even if you're dirt poor, there are services out there for you.
Yeah, and I'll make sure to provide some of those places here, at least here in Arizona, or some of the hotlines that people can get access to. So if they are, down in the bottom of the pit, right, and they can't find the way out, that they can have a resource to turn to.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, thank you so much for joining me this episode. We'll have to do some other ones in the future, some hot topic ones.
Yeah, we've talked about a lot. So.
A lot of COVID ones. We'll do that. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for joining us on this episode of Physician Heal Thyself, the podcast. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And until next time, be blessed. Thank you for listening to Physician Heal Thyself, the podcast. If you like what you've heard, please like, share, and subscribe. Help this message reach more people who may need to hear it. Leave your comments. I want to know what you think. If you're interested in learning more about Raices, visit our website at raicesndmedcenter.com. Until next time, be blessed.